So the Houston Texans had one of the more interesting drafts, but what I'll say about this, their top 6 guys are all guys who I've seen some people very high on each one of those 6 guys. And for a couple of those guys, I am one of those people who is very high on a couple of these guys. So that's why I'm very fascinated in this draft, specifically those top 6 picks, not so much the outside 150, but even those, there's some intrigue there. So first, we got to talk about the biggest pick, which was number 3. A lot of people felt like, okay, what are they going to do? Is this going to be offensive lineman? What's going to happen? They do not go offensive lineman, and they don't go Sauce Gardner, who was my favorite corner of this draft class. But I had a very similar grade on Derek Stingley. I think those guys are both awesome, and I've seen some people have him as high as their second graded prospect. Haven't seen anyone have him above Hutchinson, but I've seen people very high on him. I guess the confusion a little bit I have is we saw Lovie Smith purposely go away from Darrelle Revis in Tampa Bay because Darrelle Revis was a man corner, and he said, like, that's not going to fit my scheme. Stingley feels like he's more of a man corner. That's just kind of the vibe I get. So I'm interested in seeing, does this mean that they're going to play more man, which we did see the Texans play a decent amount more man than I feel like Lovie Smith teams typically would on third downs. And maybe that's just where Lovie Smith really feels like his corners are the most valuable, which is fair. I mean, that is one they matter the most. So maybe there's something there. But plus, I think he has the tools to still be a good cover 2 zone corner if that's what he is. Sauce Gardner, we've seen that, whereas Stingley, you're taking a bit of a chance. So that's kind of the only issue I have. But getting this value at number 3 overall, I have no issue with. I think Stingley is awesome. And people keep saying, if you haven't heard much about Stingley, kind of the idea about him is his freshman year was awesome, but then the past 2 years hasn't been as great. That's the narrative. I thought he was good last year. He didn't play a ton. The injury history is a bit concerning, and that's kind of part of why I put Sauce ahead of him. But when he's on the field and healthy, I still think he's really good and has potential to be Darrelle Revis. So that's what makes him awesome. So love this pick. This was the most important pick. I think they knocked it out of the park. At number 15, we have a weird one. And listen, there's some people that really like Kenyan Green. So I'm not going to sit here and say that he's a for sure bust trash player, because that's not how I feel about him. I still had a second round grade on him, but I did have a second round grade on him and a low second round grade on him. He goes at 15. So why am I so much lower on him than other people are? It's a good question. Because again, there's some stuff to like about him. On tape, he looked incredibly athletic, although his testing numbers were not great. So I typically trust tape over testing numbers there. So I'll assume that he is a great athlete, even if the numbers weren't spectacular. But another thing that is interesting about him is if you take him on his average day, he was good. The issue I have with someone like Green is he had some bad games, some really bad games. I keep bringing up that Arkansas game where he was guard and he didn't play particularly well. He's versatile, can play guard or tackle, which matters because, for a team like the Texans, it seems like they want to move Howard back to tackle, which is the smart decision. But who knows? Maybe Tunsil will be gone and you'll need another tackle. So maybe Green can, fill in. And also, it just helps to have versatile guys at the offensive line position because players get hurt there all the time. So that's just another benefit. He played 4 positions on the offensive line. He only didn't play center. That's it. All 4 positions he played just last year alone. So there's stuff to like about him. Just a bit of a reach for me. But again, the consensus big board is higher on him than I am. So maybe I'm wrong. Jalen Petir, another guy who I just didn't really scout that much. He's one of those guys that kind of just slipped through the cracks for me weirdly because he was, touted as a mid-second round prospect. To get him at 37, but I don't hate this. I always like drafting safeties and wide receivers in day 2. You typically get good guys with that value. So getting a safety there makes some sense. And there's some good traits in his game. So, from what I have seen, I thought it was solid. Again, maybe not the pick I would have made necessarily. I did have higher safeties on my board that were still available, but I'm not going to nitpick this one. I think it's fine. At 44, love this pick. John Michie, or I think it might actually be pronounced Michie. I've been pronouncing it Michie this entire time. I think it might be Michie. Actually, there is a T there, so I guess that makes sense. Listen, pronunciation, not really my thing. But being a good football player certainly is Michie's thing. He was really good with Alabama. He got hurt, and everyone talks about if Jameson Williams doesn't get hurt, does Alabama win the championship? Don't forget, Michie was also banged up in that. He wasn't able to play in that game. So that's another very interesting thing here. So the injury isn't great. He is a little bit smaller, but he's so shifty. He can run routes incredibly well. I think at the very least, he'll be a good slot receiver with potential to win on the outside because he is explosive. So I like this pick a lot. Texans could use a wide receiver. And again, I always say, don't let a day two go by in a draft without taking at least one wide receiver or safety. Texans got both of them. So good job there. Smart decision. At 75, we have a unique player. This is, again, someone who some people are very high on. I'm not quite as high on. Christian Harris, very physical linebacker. He's at 54 on the consensus big board. I think 75 feels about right for me when I would have drafted him. So I still like this value. Still think it's a fine pick. I'm just not as high on it as some other people are. Very physical. I just felt like, especially his coverage was not great, but maybe you hope you can coach that up. I've heard, if you care about numbers, he gave up nearly 2,000 yards in the past 2 seasons, not in his entire career, in just the past 2 years, nearly 2,000 yards. That's not great. You want to see someone who's not giving up that much, but at the same time, how much does that matter? Yards given up by a linebacker, that's kind of a fluky thing. But even so, I thought his tape, watching him in coverage, maybe some concerns there. That's what I thought. Dameon Pierce, I like this guy. I like this guy a lot. Now, I think it's a fair discussion to be had of should you be drafting a running back, period, if you're the Houston Texans when you're, a ways away from being competitive. That being said, I really like Dameon Pierce. I think he's a really quality halfback. I had him as my running back 1. So, granted, I was lower on every other running back in this draft class than other people were, but I still think he's a really talented player. They got him in the 4th. I'm surprised he fell that far when so many other running backs were taken on day 2. But with day 3, that's when I'm, it's kind of just barely when I'm okay with taking a halfback. So, 112 on the consensus big board, 107 on the Texans big board, or at least that's when I drafted him. On the NFL big board, I guess you could say. I think he'll be really good. I think he'll help the team out a lot. The question is just, is it a smart idea to draft the running back, which is a fair question. For the final 3 picks, there's also some interesting guys at these final 3 picks. Thomas Booker is someone who I'm very fascinated by. Despite the fact that he is listed as an edge, he is 309 pounds. So this feels like a kind of guy who is just someone who can play anywhere on the defensive line. You can, even if he is an edge at that size, well, then, harder to move that guy, or you can bring him, inside, which might be what the Texans end up doing. But listen, that helps, right? And that helps you get drafted, especially when we're talking round 5 now, pick 150. If you can play multiple positions, that's going to give you a much better chance of getting drafted, which will give you a better chance of getting on the field. So that's the goal with these, day 3 guys, especially like 5th round and on, is just find ways to get on the field. And for Booker, playing multiple positions helps you get on the field. So that's good. Tegan Quintaro here, tight end out of Oregon State, is a guy who, he's someone who I think basically from what I've read about him, is kind of this, big guy who can block well at 260 pounds at 6'6". And someone who, again, is an okay athlete. He's not like spectacular, but should be good tight end depth, which, hey, getting a tight end in round 5, these guys typically can be solid contributors. Finally, pick 205, Austin DeCluse here, who is someone who I'm a little confused by this pick, I guess I'll say, simply because, so I looked at his advanced numbers and did weirdly a deep dive on this, 205th overall pick. But, I'm preparing for this video. I want to, make sure I'm not just talking out of my ass about some of these picks. For someone like him, it seems like a lot of his advanced statistics aren't spectacular. He's an offensive lineman, so that does translate. There are stats that translate well to the next level. And for someone like him, not great offensive line stuff, or not great stats, at the offensive line position, which isn't the worst thing in the world if you're a developmental guy, because, again, we're talking 205. But it also seems like the way he, what he got praised for was his good hands and good technique, which if that's the case, if you already have good hands and good technique and you're still struggling to have great numbers, well, then what's going to happen at the NFL level? You can't really get coached up too much more. So I don't really get this one. But again, 205, so who cares? So yeah, as a whole, I like the draft of the Texans. Again, typically teams are going to get good players. They got good players, and especially the number 3 overall pick, that's the one that really mattered. They hit it out of the park. The trade back going from 13 to 15 was smart. Picking Kenyan Green, maybe not so much. But again, there is reason to believe he could be really good. I just have a few concerns. And then, I've already talked about them. I'm not going to go through them all again. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.